Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another scintillating episode of the True North Sports Talk podcast. We are back after a week off over the Christmas New Year's break, and we are coming to you semi live here. We're actually live on YouTube, and then we're going to post everything up after the fact the way we normally would do. So you're not going to miss a thing. If you need to rewind, go back, rewatch, don't worry, you're not missing anything today. Now, we have a great show for you today. The reason that we took the week off is just certain scheduling things just didn't work out. I apologize for that, but we are back and hopefully you enjoy the show today. Hopefully you brought your hockey hat to the show today as we are going to be talking all things from the World Junior Championship that's been going on since Boxing Day. Now, it's been quite a week, and the 2026 World Junior Championship has been absolutely amazing. We've had overtime. We may have even had a shootout game. We've had big leads. We've had blown leads. But we're now down to the final four teams. And tonight, we get the semifinals. Sweden versus Finland at 4:30, followed by Canada versus Czechia at 8:30. Both those games are at Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul, Minnesota. So whether you're in Canada, tuning in on TSN, whether you're in the States, tuning in down there, ESPN probably, check it out. But before we preview tonight's massive games, we're just going to take a look at everything that's happened so far. And folks, it's been wild. So before the tournament, there were some, well, we could call them critics, we could call them skeptics, who knows what you want to call it. But what we do know is that there were doubters about Gavin McKenna. Well, he's kind of put some of those doubts to rest. He's leading the entire tournament in scoring, as you would hope from a Team Canada superstar that he is, potential number one overall draft pick. From a completely unbiased perspective, though, and I mean, this is still juniors, right? He's been kind of invisible at times on the other side of that coin. Yes, he's been getting good assists. Yes, he's been sharp on the power play. But at other times, guys like Iginla, Baudouin, Martone, other guys have stepped up and made him fairly invisible. Misa. So there's all kind of things. You could say there's a bit of a goalie controversy in Canada because Ivankov has been rock solid in the two games he's played. Connor George has been kind of iffy in the two games he's played. So we'll see how Dale Hunter responds in the goaltending aspect tonight in one of the biggest games of the tournament against a Czechia team that took Canada to the limit in game one of the tournament. So Team USA's three-peat goals and dreams, they got crushed in the quarterfinals in heartbreaking fashion by Finland. That game was one of the games out of many that went to overtime. In that quarterfinals, the question marks that may have surrounded Canada going in after the last 2 years were absolutely blown out of the water when they demolished Slovakia 7-1. And if you remember, we did a podcast the week before this tournament started, and our dark horse pick is actually Canada's opponent tonight in Team Czechia. They are still alive for the moment, but as Canadian hockey fans, we're hoping that dark horse dies tonight at around 8:30 to 11 o'clock tonight. And it's a rematch from the last 2 years' quarterfinals where Czechia has actually bounced Canada both times in that round. So, in today's episode, we're going to cover all that. We're going to break down Canada's dominant run. We're going to dive into the possibly shocking US elimination. Although if you paid attention to that first podcast, many of the concerns going into this tournament with Team USA came to the forefront, and beyond Hudson, there wasn't a lot of there with that American team. So we'll talk about Sweden, we'll talk about Finland, we'll talk Czechia's path to the semifinals, and then near the end, you're going to want to stick around and check it out, because we are going to preview both games. And you know how I hate predictions, but we might hint a little bit as to what we hope will be the outcome of these games. So this is going to be an episode that you don't want to miss. Might go a little bit longer just because there's so much to talk about in the past week at the World Juniors. But we're going to get right down to it, and we're going to start with Team Canada, because you might say it's been the Gavin McKenna show, but there's a lot of other guys that could come or dispute that fact. Parek's been awesome, Iginla's been awesome, Martone, like the list goes on and on. So there was massive pressure. As we mentioned, they finished 5th the last 2 years after being bounced by Czechia both times in the quarterfinals. And that's been the worst back-to-back performance that Team Canada has had in the last 40 years. At the time, after last year, people were like, yo, heads got to roll here. Something's got to change. Hockey Canada has got to step up here, because in Canada, it's gold or bust every single time out. It's going to be the same way in February when the senior men's team goes to the Olympics. But after last year, what did Canada do? Well, they brought in a new management team. They hired Dale Hunter as the head coach. They assembled one of the most talented rosters in recent memory, although were some grumblings about people who were left off of the roster, and rightfully so, but that goes for the senior team as well. And then they've been dominant. Canada was, let's see, perfect in the first round. They didn't lose a game, although they won one game in overtime, so that dropped them down slightly below Sweden. And it didn't really matter much after that fact. It was just, we gotta get past Slovakia. So, Gavin McKenna. McKenna came into the tournament with quite a few questions surrounding him. He dominated the WHL, which is our Western Hockey League, last year. So that's the prairie provinces. So you got Saskatchewan, Alberta, what am I missing? Manitoba, BC. It covers all of that. And so he dominated that last year with 129 points in just 56 games. Then he moved up to Penn State in the NCAA. Now you got to understand that going to the NCAA is kind of like moving from the OHL to the AHL. All of a sudden, you're not just playing against other high schoolers. In the NCAA, there's guys up to 25, 26 years old there who are not little kids anymore, or high school kids. These are grown men who have mature strength. So you can't expect his production to be 129 points in 56 games. That would just be unrealistic to expect someone who is not quite fully developed yet jumping into a league with people who are. He's had 18 points in 16 games, so that's still more than a point a game. But people were like, ooh, that's a big drop off because in 16 games last year, he probably had 40 points. Again, this is like night and day, completely different things. So it's still good, but it's not quite the otherworldly numbers that some people thought were going to happen. Some scouts started questioning whether he was a lock for the number one pick in the 2026 draft. Well, McKenna has, in some degree, answered a lot of those questions fairly emphatically. But again, take that with a grain of salt because no one is over 20 in this tournament. You go back to the NCAA, and again, you're playing against guys who are up to 24, 25 years old, who have a lot more physical maturity than a Gavin McKenna. Also, the structures on the ice, the systems that are played in the NCAA can be very different from what he's used to in the CHL and in international play. But through 4 games, McKenna's tied for the tournament lead. He had 8 points, 3 goals, 5 assists. He had a hat-trick against Denmark in that 9-1 blowout. And that third goal, it was a bit of a breakaway, was just an absolute beauty that had the Denmark goalie reaching and just couldn't get there. So after the Denmark game, McKenna said, it's something you dream of as a kid. It felt pretty good and it was a lot of fun. I'll bet it sounded like and looked like he was having fun out there. Tija Ginla said that McKenna's third goal, he's like, that was crazy. Just to do that on a breakaway, I don't think a lot of players are thinking like him. So that was pretty special to see. Now up here in Canada, TSN's Craig Button, who was a former NHL GM and one of the most respected scouts in hockey at a point, he's been pretty adamant that McKenna is still the clear number one pick. Button said, I don't have any question in my mind that he could play in the NHL next year. I still don't see a player that's better than Gavin McKenna. Cole Hudson might have something to say about that, even some of his Canadian teammates. However, he has been unbelievable. McKenna's not satisfied after the Denmark game. He said, obviously, there's a few more bounces that I'd like to go my way. Well, you got to go out there and create them, right? But in terms of playing a full 200-foot game, he said, I think I've done a pretty good job. Well, that is fairly true. I mean, he has played fairly well throughout this tournament at both ends of the ice. And people have talked about his complete game and levels and stuff like that. So he says, I think I've showed that I've been competing here, and I think I've got a little bit more too. That's kind of the scary part about all of this is McKenna still has a lot of potential. We haven't reached his ceiling by any means. I don't even think we've barely just passed the floor of what Gavin McKenna could possibly be, as long as he's got that killer instinct and the work ethic that goes with it, that he's just never satisfied and always works to get better, especially the further he progresses in his career. You gotta have that, or you don't get to a place where Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid are at, because without the work ethic to go along with the talent, as you get older, stuff drops off and you have to work that much harder to maintain, much less to continue to grow. All right, so we've talked about Gavin McKenna. He's so far been the focus. But I have mentioned some other names. And there's a lot of other guys on this team that have showcased themselves as being either ready for the NHL, some guys have even played in the NHL this year, or who should be strongly considered for a place there next year. So Micah Misa has been excellent. A goal, 2 assists in the Denmark game alone. He's been a force at center. As I mentioned, Porter Martone has 2 goals and an assist. Zane Parekh, the Calgary Flames first rounder, has 3 goals in 4 games from the blue line. And he's been quarterbacking what so far has been a lethal power play. Think that alley-oop pass to Tij for the breakaway goal, that was just unbelievable as Iginla jumped off the bench on a line change. He waited just long enough to make sure that play was onside. Canada's depth has been the real story of them, and in the quarterfinal against Slovakia, in the first period alone, 14 different players recorded a point. I don't know that I've remembered 14 players getting a point in one period at any level of Canadian hockey. 7 different players scored goals. That's insane depth in that game against Slovakia. Canada opened the quarterfinals with an absolute onslaught. Cole Reshny scored at 13:58 in the first period. Tij Iginla made it 2-0 just 44 seconds after that. Michael Misa sniped home the third goal at 16:11. Sam O'Reilly 54 seconds after that. And that was actually between the third and the fourth goal. Slovakia changed their goalie. So that was goal number 1 on the other goalie. Brady Martin capped off the first period with a power play goal at 19:47. That goal was assisted by Gavin McKenna, and it was 5-0 after the first period. Slovakia's starting goalie Michael Prado was pulled, as we said, after 3 goals on just 12 shots. Alan Lendak came in. He faced an absolute barrage of 27 shots, and he only let in 4 goals on like 2.5 times more shots. In the second period now, Porter Martone and Cole Baudouin added goals, and that made it 7-0. Jan Chauvin finally got Slovakia on the board with a late goal, and that game ended up 7-1. We mentioned that up there earlier. Dale Hunter, Canada's head coach, was cautiously optimistic and pleased after the game. Quoting him, it says, "They came out very well. They were skating well, and we jumped on them early." It's one of the things you like in a first period, that you can set the tone for the rest of the game. Now, the question is though, and we saw a little bit of this as the game wore on with the big lead against Slovakia, is that being human beings, these are just 16 to 20-year-old kids, right? They have leeway in this regard, but they got out to a big lead, but you saw some of those not so good habits sneak back in a little bit in, say, the second half of the second period into the third period. And so you want to make sure, if you're Dale Hunter and the rest of those boys in that locker room, that you're pushing for a full 60-minute effort, because come Czechia, after that game 1 overtime win, you know you're going to need that to play against them tonight in the semifinals this year. Canada's goaltending's been pretty solid. Carter George has been the starter for 2 out of the 4 games. Jack Ivankovic, as we mentioned, had 2 of the games as well. He was in the quarterfinal game and looked very sharp, making 17 of 18 saves. Now, one of the things about Ivankovic that makes you wonder why he's not starting more games is because he plays at Michigan in the NCAA. That's the number one team in the country. He has a really strong save percentage there, but he is used to playing in less high traffic games because Carter George, if I'm not mistaken, plays for Owen Sound, and he's used to high volume. And when he doesn't get that high volume, because Owen Sound isn't the greatest team in the world, if you follow the OHL at all, the only thing that makes them solid this year is Carter George. Now, there's other guys on that Owen Sound team that might take umbrage with that fact, but it's a fact. So, there's questions among the fan base for sure, if not the media as well, as to why Ivankovic isn't the actual starting goalie. Again, he's looked sharp, he's used to lower volume and being sharp after waiting long periods of time to get work. And that's why I mentioned earlier, I'm like, well, maybe there's a bit of controversy in the Canadian net, because the sentimental favorite may be Carter George, or the one that they think is going to be the higher draft pick, the better NHL goalie eventually, all that kind of stuff. But those questions remain to be answered, especially in light of the fact that some of the higher scoring games of this tournament have involved Carter George for Team Canada. So the question is, can they really rely on him in a game that needs to be as tight as the Czechia game? Granted, he did play in that opening overtime win, but he's been a lot more shaky looking than Ivankovic in this tournament. That all being said, Canada is rolling into the semifinals here, and you have to believe, if you're Team Canada and a Canadian fan, that that's not going to stop anytime soon. They're going to keep on rolling as the tournament wears on. They've got McKenna playing out of his mind. They've got the depth of scoring. Their power play is doing what the power play is supposed to do. But tonight, they face Czechia again. And this is the time when Czechia seems to be the most dangerous, as hopefully there's enough guys there that don't remember the last 2 years and the fact that they got knocked out by Czechia. It appears Czechia loves playing the underdog role against the big, bad Canadian juggernaut. So, they're out for revenge. Canada has to be ready for it. And there is no doubt the pressure is on for Team Canada. All right. Well, for our American friends south of the border, definitely. But overall, anyone who is anyone in hockey would say that Team USA not at least making the semis is a bit of a shock. Granted, that Finland team that knocked them out, that's a good team. Those guys are really good players over there. And at 4:30 today, Sweden better be ready. That's all we can say, really and truly, about that, because those Finn boys, they come ready. So, one of the biggest stories, if you remember from our previous podcast going into the tournament, was the fact that Team USA was looking to three-peat. At this point in the tournament, one of the biggest stories and biggest shocks, really, is that Team USA got eliminated the way Canada did the last 2 years in the quarterfinals. The United States came into the tournament, as we mentioned, two-time defending gold medalists in 24 and 25. They were looking for the historic repeat, and only Canada has ever won 3 straight at the World Juniors in the modern era. And that was between '05 to '09 when they won not 3, but 5 in a row. That's unheard of at this tournament simply because these aren't professionals. These are high school kids. So they're not at the same level quite. It's great hockey. If you've been watching, it's unbelievable hockey. But they're just not at that professional level, most of these kids. Some of them are, as they've been playing in the NHL and just came back for the tournament. But that's a small percentage of these players. The US was hosting the tournament in Minnesota on home ice. They had sold out crowds in St. Paul and Minneapolis. And this was supposed to be, of sorts, a coronation of a new dynasty, a new team to beat, instead of it always seeming to be Canada. But instead, it ended in heartbreak. It was an overtime game, and on Friday night, January 2nd, the US faced Finland in the quarterfinals. They were at Grand Casino Arena, and this was a rematch of last year's gold medal game. And you can bet those Finns wanted to win that game the same way the US did 4-3 in overtime last year. And boy, did they get that revenge. The game was scoreless through the first period. Both teams were feeling each other out, as you might expect. Nick Kempf was solid in net all game, really. For the US, Petteri Rimpinen, sorry guys from Finland, I get tongue-tied on your names sometimes. I don't mean it. But he stood on his head for Finland when it mattered the most. In the second period, the US struck first. Who else but Cole Hudson? And he had just returned from a scary head injury, which also the US might point to be like, well, that's kind of why we didn't go farther. But everyone is banged up, nicked up, all that kind of stuff. But that head injury was real scary. And he was actually knocked unconscious by a puck that hit him in the back of the head. He scored in that second period, as we mentioned, to give US a 1-0 lead. And with that goal, Hudson became the all-time leading scorer among American defensemen at the World Juniors, incidentally passing his brother to obtain that record. And that is an incredible achievement in itself. Finland tied it quickly, but then Cole Eiserman scored to put the US up 2-0 right near the end of the second period, so they were heading into the third, leading 2-1. And then the third period happened. Finland scored 2 goals in quick succession. Leo Tuva and Joona Saarelainen. Hopefully I got that right. And all of a sudden, Finland was up 3-2. The home crowd went silent. They were stunned. The American team itself looked a bit rattled. That would have been a good place, and I don't remember if they did or not, but that was the time to call the timeout if you're the Americans. With 1:33 left in regulation, Riker Lee for the Americans tied it up 3-3. He was assisted by James Hagens and Will Zellers. And I would say Will Zellers probably had the best tournament behind Cole Hudson overall. Lee's goal sent the game to overtime, that giving the US new life after feeling so deflated, giving up those 2 goals so quickly. Now, overtime is played 3-on-3. The winner of that one period, unless it went to a shootout, goes to the semifinals and the loser goes home. So 2 minutes and 11 seconds into overtime, and it was over. Matthias Vanhanen cycled the puck out of the right corner, fed it to Arttu Väliälä in the lower half of the right circle. Väliälä snapped the shot past Kampf's blocker, and Finland moved on to play Sweden 4-3. 11,779 fans went silent, except for maybe about 100 or so that were there for Finland. Kempf was devastated. He said afterwards, I overplayed it a little bit, gave him that far side, and you could see it. He wasn't wrong. He said, I kind of blacked out in the moment after it went in. Obviously, there's shock involved there for sure. And he's like, it's definitely one I'll be thinking about for a long time. Cole Hudson playing his first game back after being stretchered off the ice. You could tell that this loss hit him pretty hard. He said, I rushed myself back, but didn't do enough to help my team win. Don't beat yourself up, Cole. You did more than enough. I don't have a gold medal around my neck. I could have scored a goal in overtime. I could have done plenty of things better. Well, maybe those opportunities weren't there. Just, it's okay, Cole. You'll have plenty of other opportunities, God willing. But for him to feel that way, that's brutal. To be able to return from a scary injury like that, to still set a record, and still take accountability for the loss, that shows a tremendous amount of maturity from such a young man who's willing to be accountable, even though on the outside looking in, we're all sitting here going, dude, you can't blame yourself like that. But that's amazing to see from such a young man. Team captain Brody Zimmer summed it up. I feel like we let down our country. And it's hard not to feel that way. So Finland, though, really earned that win. Petteri Rimpänen made 28 saves. Several of them were highlight reel stops. They were late in the game, and it kept Finland in it. Finnish captain Aaron Kiviharju said afterwards, we wanted that revenge from last year, and we kind of earned it tonight. Earn it you did, sir. So what went wrong for the US? Well, one of the issues that we mentioned going into the tournament is that unfortunately last year's goaltender had aged out of the tournament, so he wouldn't be available this year, no matter what happened. And if you look at the goaltending picture this year, Nick Kempf had an .871 save percentage in the tournament. I'm sure if he sees that number, he will be the first to tell you that's not good enough, and that's not up to what he feels his standard should be. So quite plainly, that's not good enough. The US never really found a true number one goalie throughout the tournament. And another thing that we mentioned, I feel like, in our podcast was discipline. The Americans took way too many penalties. And when you can't stay out of the box, I don't care how good you are, you're playing from behind, and the momentum's on the other team's side far too often if you're in the penalty box. Honestly, in this game, objectively, Finland was just the better team. They wanted it more. They played a more complete game, starting with Rimpänen. And when the moment came in overtime, they capitalized. And that's what you need, is to capitalize. So, as it stands, the three-peat dream is dead. The US is going home, and as we mentioned off the top, Finland moves on to face Sweden at 4:30 in the first semifinal. This is a devastating loss for Team USA. They had home ice. They had plenty of talent on the team. Unfortunately, this time around, they couldn't get it done. And this one is going to sting for a long time. So, let's talk about the other two teams in the semifinals. We have Sweden versus Finland. All right, so we'll start with Sweden. Sweden came into the tournament with massive expectations, rivaled probably only by those of Team Canada, and maybe Team USA too. They have one of the most talented forward groups in the entire event. Anton Frondell, Eddie Gemborg, Ivar Stenberg, Victor Eklund. These are all already elite NHL prospects. If you remember in the pre-tournament games, there were two that Canada played against Sweden. One Canada won, one Sweden won. So that kind of let you know right from the get-go that Sweden was a dangerous team this year. They delivered in the preliminary round. They went 4-0 in Group A. They won all 4 games. None of them went to overtime. They beat Germany, Slovakia, Switzerland. Now those games, you look at those teams and you go, you dang well better win those games. But the one that was most impressive would have been when they took on the Americans and, in a way, handled them very easily with a 6-3 victory. But that USA game was huge. Lucas Peterson, or Pedersen, whichever way you want to say that one, Eddie Gemborg each scored twice. Jack Berglund had 3 assists. Sweden jumped out to the early lead, and they never looked back. As you can tell by the final score, the Americans just couldn't keep up to the Swiss onslaught. In the quarterfinals, Sweden faced Latvia. Latvia had been a bit of a Cinderella story. They took Canada to overtime, but Sweden proved to be too much. Anton Frondell scored twice, and over Latvia, Sweden again won 6-3. Sweden's strength, like Canada, has been their depth. They can roll 4 lines that can score. Viggo Bork and Liam Danielsson have been excellent playmakers. Love Harnstrom has been solid in goal. He's had a 28 save performance against the Americans. What is Sweden's weakness? Well, they haven't won a gold since 2012. That's 12 years now. They've been close so many times and have fallen short. So their biggest question is, can they beat themselves tonight and break through? Because it seems to me that there's just something in their own self where they just keep beating themselves. And that's why they haven't won. But tonight they face a Finland team that was in the finals last year. And this should be an absolute battle. This will be an excellent game to watch. So starting at 4:30, going right through till you go to bed tonight, there's going to be amazing hockey being played in this tournament. These two arch rivals have somewhat contrasting styles. So we've talked about Sweden. Well, what about that Finland team they're going up against? Finland seems to be the ultimate grinder team. Not quite the finesse that Sweden has. They don't have the star power of Canada or Sweden, but they have 14 returning players from the silver medal team last year. That's more continuity than any other team in the tournament. Finland plays a structured, disciplined, and what you might call a low event game, meaning not a lot's going to happen. They're going to try and keep it low scoring, and they're going to be reminiscent of Jacques Martin's late 90s, early 2000s Ottawa Senators team that were known as being the yawn team because it was like 1-0, 2-1 type games because they were so tightly contested. They frustrate opponents, they capitalize on mistakes when they happen. They have elite goaltending in Rippinen, and he's been lights out all tournament. Finland went 2-0-1-1 in the preliminary round, 2 wins, 1 OT loss, 1 shootout loss. They beat Czechia 3-2 in overtime in a huge game, and of course they just knocked out the US in the quarterfinals. Yeah, just making sure I got that right. So Aaron Kivivaharu, Finland's captain, has been excellent on the blue line. Kasper Halttunen and Emil Hemming provide offensive punch up front. Una Siralainen has been clutch in big moments. But here's the thing. Finland loves being the underdog. They seem to thrive in these situations. They certainly did last year in the gold medal game, even though they lost to Team USA. And they are highly motivated to try and get back to that game and get to that next level, which is the gold medal. Tonight's semifinal between Sweden and Finland, it's going to be an intense battle. Sweden might have more skill, but Finland has more experience and likely better goaltending, because going back to our previous episode where we talked about this, goaltending in these bigger games was one of the question marks surrounding Team Sweden. So this game here, I would suggest it's a bit of a 50-50 coin flip. And at this point, take your pick, really, because, I mean, both teams are firing on all cylinders. They play high-level, high-octane hockey, and you don't want to miss it. All right, now we're going to, for a moment, harken back to our previous podcast for a moment, and we had a dark horse pick for this tournament. And that dark horse is actually still alive in the tournament. Do you remember who it was? Czechia. So, let's talk about them and see how they're doing. Remember, the last 2 years, Czechia's knocked out Canada in the quarterfinals. They won bronze medals in both years. And they're back in the semifinals again. So they're going to, at minimum, be playing for a bronze medal for a third consecutive year. Czechia went 2-1-0. Sorry, let's try that again. 2-1-0-1. In the preliminary round, they beat Switzerland and Denmark. They lost to Canada in a wild 7-5 game, and they lost to Finland 3-2 in overtime. In the quarterfinals, Czechia faced Switzerland, and that game was actually way tighter than the final score would indicate. For the first 2 periods at least, that game was like 2-1, 2-2, very tight until the third period. Czechia has Adam Jiricek attending his 3rd World Juniors. He scored for the 4th straight game. Thomas Poletin and Wojtek Sahar were also excellent up front. What is Czechia's biggest problem? And we mentioned this right off the beginning, is their goaltending. They lost their starting goalie, Jakub Milota, to injury before the tournament. They've been relying on Michael Orsulak and Matthias Marek, and neither of them have World Junior experience. That being said, they're still in the semifinals, so neither one of those guys has been horrible, aside from the 7-5 game against Canada. And here's the thing, this Czechia team is confident. Obviously, they're not afraid of Canada. They took them 7-5, even though they lost. They beat them twice when it mattered the last 2 years. And they just seem to know how to win in the tight games. And they also thrive as the underdogs. Adam Jiricek is a St. Louis Blues prospect. He's the heart and soul of the team. He's a leader, a two-way player, and he's been incredible for this Czechia team all tournament long. Tonight, Czechia faces Canada in a rematch from the opening game. Canada won that game 7-5, but that game was way closer as Czechia led 3-2 at one point in that game. They know they can compete with Canada if their goaltending can hold up, and that's a bit of a big if though. They know they have a shot. If Canada's going to come out flying the way they did against Slovakia, obviously they want some kind of revenge and redemption, and they just may have too much firepower for this Czechia team. But still, Czechia could be the ultimate spoiler. And the reason they were our dark horse is simply because you can never count them out. Doesn't matter who they're playing, they're gonna fight. So, they're still our dark horse team, but hopefully as a Canadian, they get relegated to the bronze medal once again, and Canada's fighting for gold. All right. Well, tonight's semifinals. We've already done a little bit of talking about them. The Sweden versus Finland game starting, let's see, an hour and a half from now. Either doesn't look like anyone's really checked in live, but an hour from when this is recorded, this is going to be a defensive battle. Sweden has the more polished offense. Finland, with Rimpinen, has the far superior goaltending, but Sweden is playing for their first gold since 2012. Finland's playing for revenge after losing to the US in last year's final. Let's check out some keys to the game. For Sweden, they got to score early. If they can get up 2-0, 3-1, something like that to open up their game, that's when Sweden can strike. Anton Frondell and Eddie Genborg need to be difference makers as they've been all tournament. Jack Berglund needs to be there setting them up, making the assists, doing the things that he's been doing all tournament. As for Finland, Petteri Rimpinen, he's just got to steal this game. I mean, if he can keep it close, 1-0, 2-1, then Finland definitely has a chance. Both teams need to stay out of the penalty box. They need to make sure they stick within their own style of play and not be drawn out by the other team. So, Finland has a chance in the third period or overtime if Sweden makes some mistakes here and there and Finland's able to capitalize. They need to frustrate Sweden. As I mentioned, they play that old school Senator style hockey. They got to clog the neutral zone, and as we just said, capitalize on the mistakes. This is the type of game that you could see going to overtime, or at the very least coming down to the last couple of minutes with the goalie pulled. And it's so hard to really make a prediction on this. Just the way the tournament's been going, the role that Sweden's been on, it's so hard to count them out. But Finland, their goaltending may be what wins the day. So, tune in tonight. Again, TSN, ESPN, wherever this is showing, and check it out and see. You will not be disappointed. Then right after that, at 8:30, you have Canada versus Czechia. The storyline for this game and the preview for it is, for Canada's perspective, this is the revenge game. Canada's been waiting for this moment for 365 days, shall we say, after the last 2 years losing to Czechia in the quarters. So both times it was heartbreaking, and this is Canada's chance to exercise those demons. So what are the keys to the game? Well, they got to stay out of the box. They need a complete 60-minute effort with no letdowns, like the last half of the game against Slovakia. Because if you're not up 7 goals, there's no room for that. They can't have the mistakes, and they need Gavin McKenna to be Gavin McKenna. They need their power play to click. It's been lethal all tournament. They also need the rest of the guys, Perek, Maisa, Martone, Baudouin, all these guys to continue playing at a high level. And they also need whichever goalie Dale Hunter goes with. And for me, I'd be choosing Jack Ivankovic. But that's up to him. So Carter George or Ivankovic, they need them to be very strong in net to keep Czechia off the board. On Czechia's side of things, they need to keep it close. If Canada gets up 3-0, 4-1, then Czechia's in real trouble. Czechia needs to frustrate Canada, block shots, and hope their goaltender can be solid enough to keep them in it. Adam Jiricek needs to be a shutdown force on defense. Thomas Politin and Wojtek Sahar, they need to be the catalyst for the offense. Again, I don't like predictions, you know this, but we're down to that point where is Canada's skill and just more complete roster going to win the day? Or is Czechia's goaltending, or maybe a bounce here or there, going to make this way closer than it should be? Czechia has to. They have to stay out of the box and be disciplined within themselves against this Canada team. Because if you're doing a parade to the penalty box, this power play that's been so dominant all tournament long is going to sink Czechia if they aren't careful. So, 8:30 tonight. Again, TSN, ESPN, wherever you can find this game. Don't forget to check it out. Czechia is going to definitely be making this interesting, but we'll see how it ends. Hopefully what we're talking about is a gold medal game of Canada-Sweden, perhaps Canada-Finland, but we definitely want Canada on one side up here north of the border. So, don't forget, check out the 3-minute drill every night this week. You can bet Monday night we'll be talking about who won the gold medal. Tonight we'll be talking about who's going to be playing in the gold medal and bronze medal game. And no matter how it turns out, tonight for sure, it is going to be an absolute barn burner night to be watching junior hockey. Sweden's got the offense to keep up with Canada. As the pre-tournament showed, Canada's got Gavin McKenna, and that may be the difference all the way through. All right, so we've been going at this for darn near an hour, which is good. We like that. That's about the time we like to keep things to here at True North Sports Talk. So let's wrap this up with some final thoughts. As I've been saying all throughout this podcast, this tournament's been incredible. There's been drama. There's been upsets, especially the Finland-US game. The storylines have been amazing. It's been everything that we hoped for going into this tournament. Gavin McKenna has done a stellar job of silencing any doubters he may have had. He's proven to a degree that he's the real deal. And Team USA's three-peat dreams ended in heartbreak. But Finland, they got their revenge. Sweden's one win away from their first gold attempt, at least, since 2012. Canada's 60 minutes away from redemption. So we'll see. Tonight's semifinals are going to be must-see TV. Sweden versus Finland, don't forget, kicks off in about an hour and a half at 4:30. Canada versus Czechia at 8:30. Both games are at Grand Casino Arena in St. Paul. The gold medal game will be on Monday. The bronze medal game is in the afternoon on Monday. And I believe the gold medal game is at 8:30, which would probably be 4:30 for the bronze medal. And for Canada, this is about more than just winning gold. It's about pride, it's about redemption, and all those things that go along with it. It's about proving they're still the best junior hockey nation in the world, proving that they're still the team to beat. And this is about ending 2 years of what really for Canada hockey in general has been a little bit embarrassing the last couple years. For Sweden, it's about breaking a 12-year drought, proving they belong with the elites like Canada, US. For Finland, it's about building upon last year's silver medal and trying to capture their first gold since 2019. And for Czechia, they just love being the dark horse, that little thorn in the side of all these big, hyped up teams. They're just happy to be here, but they're that dark horse that shocked Canada before. So you can never look ahead beyond the opponent that's right in front of you, which is why I hate predicting things. I don't know who's going to be in the gold medal. You don't either. But this is why we watch the games. So, that's it for today. That's our recap of the 2026 World Juniors so far. And we've covered Canada's dominant run, led by Gavin McKenna. Broke down Team USA's elimination by Finland. Talked about Sweden, Finland, Czechia's path to where we are now. And we took a look ahead to tonight's games. We've let you know what we think. Y'all let us know what you think using the hashtag TrueNorthSportsTalk. Can Canada finally get their revenge? Will Sweden beat Finland? Who's winning the gold on Monday? Let us know. Hit us up on socials. Leave your comments. However you can reach out. We want to hear what your predictions are. Again, thank you for tuning in, sticking it out to the end of True North Sports Talk. This was our episode about the World Juniors. Enjoy tonight's game. And we will let you know as things go along. We'll see you again next week. Until then, let's go Canada and enjoy the games.